Body to the Anderson Law Power Hour podcast with attorney Tim Anderson and another outstanding lawyer here in the firm, Sean Myhill. Welcome you all to the show today. Understand the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the guest. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Also, there's no attorney-client privilege. Feel free to ask your question or comment there on Facebook. Legal consultation services will be determined at the time of your appointment. Anderson Law is a firm located at 2492 North Landing Road, Suite 104 here in Virginia Beach. VirginiaLawOffice.com, online, VirginiaLawOffice.com. Feel free to call the office with any immediate questions or concern. Area code 757-800-1000, 757-800-1000. And I don't have the spinner, balloons, or anything, but Happy New Year!
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year! Looking forward to the 2020. 2019 has been a challenge. A lot of exciting things, of course, happening in the legislature with January just around the corner. But we've got some other things we want to talk about, some behaviors and things that occurred during this time of the year. And that's about
DUIs.
And something I'm very conscious of during this time of the year. I'll give a little reminder about celebratory gunfire.
Let's not shoot off the guns to ring in the new year.
All right. So what's on the topic and what's primary on your mind today, Tim, and Sean, that we need to talk about?
So we have been doing this for a while, right?
Yes, sir.
It's usually just been you and me. Now we have 4 people in here.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see the 4th. She's kind of tucked away out of that. But on Facebook, you can say hello to Tara. She's over there running the computer, and she's been moderating a lot of our Facebook discussion, so you probably heard from her if you responded on there. But she's right there, even though you can't see her. We brought Sean Myhill in for the first part of the show because Sean does most of our DUI work in Virginia. And this is a time of the year, especially tonight, where a lot of people are going to get caught up in the snares of a DUI. And I guess before we really jump into that, I mean, use Uber, okay?
Yes.
It's so stupid not to use Uber. If you're going to go out tonight and you're not even really thinking about drinking, still Uber, because if you do drink, you might feel like you're okay to drive, and then you're going to get caught up in something, and it's going to cost you thousands of dollars. It's going to cost you your liberty. It's going to cost you insurance. It's going to cost you all kinds of things, and you could kill somebody in the process. I mean, you could wreck into somebody and cause somebody death or serious injury. So if you're going out tonight on January 31st, best advice is to Uber if you're going to go out. But Sean's here. He's our DUI attorney. Sean's been doing this for a while. I'll tell you, he's crackerjack. Sean comes from the People's Republic of New York.
Right.
But he he got all that beaten out of him when he went to law school down in North Carolina and accepted some of the American values that the folks in North Carolina still have, right?
And the dialect, you got to talk, you from North Carolina? You went to North Carolina?
Not there. To Sean's credit, he has he's from the northern part of New York, so it's not quite as bad.
New York and North Carolina.
Southern Canada, if you will. Southern Canada.
All right.
So he went to Wake Forest, and he's been here for a few years, and we're glad to have him. So what I wanted to talk to Sean about is something that a lot of you are probably going to find yourselves in tonight if you go out, and that's a DUI checkpoint, right?
Right.
So you do need to understand in Virginia that a DUI can happen in a lot of ways. You could get in an accident and the police are there. You could be driving and the police are behind you and they think that you're under the influence, or you could just get randomly stopped at a DUI checkpoint going home. And we're going to talk about that. A lot of people get charged with DUIs driving perfectly and just get ensnared in a DUI checkpoint, which they're going to be all over Hampton Roads. And if you're watching this from out of the other areas, they're going to be all over everywhere tonight. So here's some tips and tricks from our DUI expert on what you should expect, what you should do, how you should perform, what tests you should take, what tests you shouldn't take. And so, Sean, tell us what we should do if we get into a DUI checkpoint.
Absolutely. So checkpoints are one of the exceptions in Virginia and across the United States, where generally anytime the police want to stop you and engage you in a stop, it requires that there be some reasonable suspicion that you're doing something wrong or that you have done something wrong in the recent past. The courts have held that even though there is no reasonable suspicion, these checkpoints and sobriety checkpoints are valid so long as that they're done according to the law. And what that means is that there need to be specific plans in place. The officers need to have their discretion limited. They can't just pick and choose which cars to stop in these checkpoints. There needs to be a specific written plan. Now, they could be stopping every third vehicle, every fifth vehicle. They could be stopping every vehicle. But again, they need to do it according to that plan for it to be valid. Once you're at one of those checkpoints, you do need to identify yourself to law enforcement. That is a requirement. But the Fifth Amendment does not require you to incriminate yourself in any way. So if they start asking you questions about, did you have anything to drink? Where are you coming from? Are you coming from the bar? You are not required or obligated to answer any of those questions if you think it could be used against you.
Yeah, and that's what is the cop first thing going to say? Good evening, sir. Have you been drinking tonight? That's the first thing they're going to say to you, right? And then when you say, oh, yeah, I just had 2 drinks, because that's what everybody says, right? He had 2 drinks.
It was always 2.
And it's going to go downhill from there. So when you admit to drinking to the officer, you're going to get pulled over for further evaluation. So you bring up a good point. So if you approach a checkpoint and they just wave you through, then they could be doing like every 3rd car or every 5th car or something like that. What if I see a checkpoint and I decide to U-turn and try to get away from it? What would happen?
Well, any behavior that they can deem evasive, they can use as reasonable suspicion to pull you over. Now, a lot of times where these checkpoints are set up, it's going to be designed so that you come around a corner and there's not 4 or 5 roads that you could be turning down. You're going to be there with the checkpoint. Now, if there is one set up in the distance and you're just going about your business and you turn right or left down another road, there's nothing wrong with that. However, if you're on a one-way road and you do a U-turn through the median, they're going to be following up with you after that.
Yeah, I think that, one checkpoint that we've noticed in Virginia Beach has always been coming over the Rudy Inlet, and you come over the bridge and you're coming down towards the aquarium, and all of a sudden the lights are right there. So you can't see the lights because the bridge is blocking the lights, and by the time you're over it, you're on the checkpoint. And if you see, if that happens to you and you try to drive through the grass, they're gonna come after you, right? They're gonna come after you and pull you over. So what if I've had a glass of wine, and that's it, just literally one glass of wine. It's 12:30 a.m. on January 1, and I get up to a DUI checkpoint. What should I do?
Well, again, you do have to identify yourself when law enforcement asks for your ID, your driver's license, and everything like that. What they're looking for when they start asking you questions is anything that could indicate intoxication or consumption of alcohol. So when you say that you had a single glass of wine, if you choose to admit that, they're going to hear that you've been drinking tonight, period.
Yeah.
And they're going to take it, one thing's going to lead to another, and they're going to say, all right, we just want to do some tests to make sure that you're okay to drive. Just want to confirm that everything's all set, and then as long as it is, you'll be going on your way. And that's where the field sobriety tests start, and it leads one thing to another after that.
And one thing you shared with us before, Tim, when they lean in your vehicle, they're smelling to see if you have any alcohol in the vehicle or on your breath.
Absolutely. Yeah, it has a distinct smell, right? And if they smell that, or they smell marijuana or anything. DUI checkpoint, they could pull you over for suspicion of driving under the influence of drugs too, right? It doesn't just have to be alcohol. So you got big bloody shot, watery eyes, and you smell like marijuana, they could test you for that too, right?
Exactly, and those are some of the things that officers would be looking for and put in their police report as they approach the vehicle. Before you say anything, they're going to be looking, as you mentioned, for that odor of alcohol, glassy bloodshot eyes, any indicia of intoxication they're going to be looking for as they approach.
So if I lie to them and say, no, I haven't had any alcohol to drink, and they smell that on me, then they're still going to probably ask me to pull over, right?
Exactly.
Now, what if I just decide, I'm not going to participate in any of their carnival tricks? What would happen to me if I just dug my heels in and said, I'm not going to do anything, you're not going to test me? What would the likely outcome be?
Well, technically, they probably can't hold that against you, but it is going to create some reasonable suspicion that there's something to hide there.
Yeah.
So they're going to be relying at that point, if they don't have any admissions, if you refuse to cooperate and do any field sobriety tests, they're going to use those refusals in addition to things like the odor of alcohol, slurred speech, glassy bloodshot eyes, all those things that typically end up in a DUI police report. And looking at the totality, they'll likely determine that there's enough to take you down to the station and have you blow into the breathalyzer there.
And what if I don't do that?
Well, there's a couple things with that, and that's a question that often comes up. There's 2 different breath tests. There's one that they'll likely offer you at the scene. That's called a preliminary breath test. And the officer will advise you that you do have the right to refuse that, and that even if you do comply with it, they can't use that number against you in court. And that's true. If you blow on the side of the road and it's .12, or anything like that, well over the .08 limit, that number will not come into court from the officers. What they will use it for is to establish probable cause to then take you down to the station and have you blow into that official and toxilizer at that point.
Right.
Now, the one at the station, that's where they get a printout, piece of paper that says what the result was, and that certainly is the one that's admissible in court and that they'll use against you. Now, if you refuse to do that down at the station, that's a separate charge. It's a civil charge, meaning it's not another criminal offense, at least on your first offense for refusal. However, where they get you is once you refuse, the penalty on the civil side of things is that you won't be able to get a license for 12 months, even a restricted license.
Ooh, that's serious there, not being able to drive. I don't think folks understand the ramifications of that stop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's called implied consent, right?
It is. That's the implied consent law in Virginia. If you're convicted of a DUI, you lose your right to drive for 12 months. However, you'd be eligible for a restricted license. If you're convicted of the refusal, that restricted license is off the table completely. And there is a bill on the table currently, I think it's House Bill 34 presented this year, which would undo that. It would be 30 days with no restricted after a refusal, and then you'd be eligible for a restricted license for months 2 through 12 after that.
Oh, that's good to know. I wasn't even paying attention to House Bill 34. I've been talking a lot about the law.
16
I probably should start paying attention to the stuff that we actually do around here.
Right after that.
Nobody's looking at that. Well, thanks for bringing that to our attention. That's very interesting. And one of the problems I think that we've always had in representing people with DUIs is they come in with a refusal and a DUI, right?
Exactly.
And then that really puts us in an impossible position on representing them, because what are you going to do? Like, could we try this and maybe beat the DUI? Sure, but we lose the refusal, and if we lose the refusal, you can't drive for a full year no matter what. I mean, you can't even take your kid to school.
Wow.
Right? So, so you get in this position where if you get charged with both of these offenses, it makes it extremely difficult to actually try the case, because the person has to be willing to lose their license, right, for a full year.
Exactly.
And that's kind of the consequence. But I mean, would you agree that if you have been drinking, that the very best thing to do is just to do absolutely nothing? Don't do the test. Don't admit to anything. Don't even talk to them. Just hand them your driver's license and let them take it from there.
I would agree with that, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's probably what I would say too. I mean, look, if you're going to get locked up, it's better not to let the police build the case against you, right? Have them. Let's talk about field sobriety tests. So, like, one would be like a walk and turn test, right?
Yep.
And like a one-legged stand test, and the horizontal gaze nystagmus test, and all of that. And I've always called them carnival tricks, because I don't think anybody could pass them. Anybody sober, even if you're sober,
right.
It's cold outside, flashing lights,
Wind
you're
blowing,
dealing with the police, cars are driving by. It'd be hard to pass that sober, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly the thing. A lot of people say, well, I think I passed the test, or, I didn't do so well, maybe I failed the test. The tests aren't even pass-fail. What the officers are looking for are a certain number of clues per test. So like on the HGN, the horizontal gaze, the nystagmus, there's a total of 6 clues that they're looking for. And if the officers find or speculate that they can identify 2 or more clues, that's supposed to establish a certain % likelihood that you're intoxicated. Same with a 9-step walk and turn, where they're looking for a more substantial number of clues. Same on the one-legged stand. Now, for example, on the one-legged stand, they could be looking for clues such as raising your arms out to the side for balance or putting your foot down. Those would be the types of clues that they're looking for on those tests. It doesn't come down to, well, you failed this test for this reason. It's just, I observed X number of clues.
Okay. Right.
So don't do any of those tests. Don't talk to the cops other than identifying your name. Don't blow into the preliminary breath test. And then when we get to the station, what would you do?
At that point, it does cut both ways. In Virginia, there are some elevated penalties or some mandatory minimum penalties for elevated BACs if you blow at that one back at the station. So if you think your number is going to be off the charts, if you think you're a .25, 3 times the legal limit or more, and you blow, you're going to have a 10-day mandatory minimum penalty that you're facing there. So, I mean, it does cut both ways. However, if you refuse it, as Mr. Anderson pointed out earlier, it's going to make it very tough for us to fight the DUI, where we're faced with either a refusal or a DUI charge. It's going to put us in a tough position.
Yeah. Tara, we got any questions on DUIs?
Not right now.
Okay, well, that's good. So once you get the DUI charge, your license is suspended for how long?
It's a 7-day administrative suspension on the first.
All right, so once you get even charged, you can't drive at all for any reason for 7 days.
Correct.
And then after the 7 days, you can go back to driving normally until your court date?
Exactly. Yep.
All right.
Anywhere that they're going to repossess or take your car off the road or anything like that?
Oh, well, they arrest you, right?
They arrest
and
you.
then tow your car if you're the only
Right.
driver.
Depending on where it is. If it's on the road, if you pulled over to the side of the road after a traffic stop, it'll be towed if there's nobody else there that hasn't been drinking that can drive it. If it's on private property, they may be able to leave it there until you or somebody else can pick it up.
Okay. Whew. All right.
Yeah,
More
I mean,
money.
that is a reasonably good point. If you are not at a checkpoint, but you actually see the blue lights in the back of your rear view mirror,
Mhm.
always a good idea to try to get into like a McDonald's parking lot or something like
Oh,
that.
good
Because
point, yeah.
if you do get arrested, the car can stay there and they don't have to tow it. But if you're on the side of the road, they'll tow it, and that just increases the impound fees and complications of you getting your vehicle back. So if you are pulled over by the police, even for a speeding ticket, because you don't know why you're being pulled over, right?
Right.
Always a good idea to try to get into a parking lot.
Good idea, yeah.
Not, that I mean you can lead the police down a 5-mile road, because then you're charged with eluding, right? But if it's an option to get off the road and into a parking lot, it's always a good idea to try to do that. So then you go to the DUI trial. You have the trial. What kind of punishment? What kind of penalties? Can I get it reduced to reckless driving?
In very limited circumstances, that may become an option through our conversations and negotiations with the prosecutor. Usually in jurisdictions around here, the only times that prosecutors would consider that is if they have some pretty substantial evidentiary issues with the case. That's where it's something, you may hear wet reckless, where you'll end up with a reckless driving conviction, doesn't have all the mandatory punishments that come along with the DUI. They'll likely toss in an ASAP requirement and things like that. But once we're going to trial, assuming that's the way it goes, if we're going to trial on a DUI, it's going to be guilty or not guilty on that charge.
Right. And how could you beat a DUI in Virginia?
Well, there are a lot of avenues that we want to look into. If it's not a checkpoint situation, if you got pulled over, we'll certainly want to look into the reasonable suspicion and the probable cause for the stop. After that, again, most jurisdictions around here have body cams in use. So what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll review the body cams, see what statements may have been made at the time, see how the performance on the field sobriety test actually went, make sure that the officers, if applicable, read the implied consent laws to you accurately. It's a pretty lengthy form that they usually read word for word, but we want to make sure they checked all those boxes. And if they did any of those things wrong, that's where it really starts to open up the door and give us some avenues to pursue at trial as far as some of those evidentiary issues.
Yeah.
But what if I didn't get my Miranda rights?
That's something that gets asked pretty regularly. Now, Miranda rights, the right to remain silent, the right to have an attorney with you during questioning, things like that, those all apply once you're in custody. They don't generally apply when you're stopped on the side of the road for a brief traffic stop, which is considered more of a short-term detention rather than a custodial interrogation. Now, certainly if you get back to the station and they're trying to question you more in depth and maybe question you about other unrelated things and you say you want an attorney, at that point certainly they'll have to stop questioning you. However, on the side of the road, if you ask for an attorney to be there with you for field sobriety tests, they're going to shoot that idea down right away.
And everything you say up until the time the handcuffs go on comes in, right?
It is.
Yeah, because you haven't been under arrest. And that's important to know. I mean, we get asked that all the time. Why didn't I get my Miranda rights? How can my statements come in? Because you weren't under arrest.
Exactly.
That's right.
All
You got
right.
any questions?
Yeah, you had a great congratulations on the YouTube page.
Oh, hey, YouTube
moving
page.
on up. That's
Virginia
fantastic.
Law Office, by the way. Virginia Law Office is the YouTube page if you're interested in that.
Yeah, that's great, and congratulations to you all on that. When we were doing the show, I think earlier this year, you talked about the various levels of alcohol consumption over a period of time that can affect the BAC, your blood alcohol content. Would you be able to go over some of those?
Yeah, you want to shoot that out a little bit?
Sure.
Like what would happen? Totally no alcohol in my system. What would happen if I drank a glass of wine right now? Where would I probably be?
So a typical normal size drink is going to raise your BAC about 0.02%. So typical standard glass of wine, maybe one shot of liquor or one can of beer, it's all going to be approximately the same. Now that doesn't apply if you're drinking 24-ounce beers or anything crazy like that, but standard drinks it's going to be about 0.02 increase to the BAC per drink. Wow. And your body can process less than that. So it's going to be about 0.01 or so per hour that are going to be processed out of your system. Mm-hmm. So if you're there having a few drinks per hour, it's going to add up and it can definitely sneak up on you where, you may say, I feel all right to drive,
Right.
without realizing that your BAC has crept up well over that 0.08 threshold.
One of my favorite drinks is a Long Island iced tea. Okay, I don't know about you, Mark, but that's one of my go-to drinks. And so a Long Island iced tea has, I think, 3 different liquors in it, right? And so if you mix those liquors together, you know, that would be 3 ounces of liquor into one drink. So I could be totally sober, drink a Long Island iced tea, and maybe hit a 0.06 off of one drink, right?
Exactly.
It's very possible. So so you do have to kind of, it's not just a drink puts in 0.02, it's how many ounces of liquor that they put into it. And Sean's right. I mean, if you drink a drink that has 2 or 3 ounces of liquor, or you get a double or something like that, you could be above a legal limit with with a big drink, a big margarita. You know, if they put 4 ounces of tequila in it, you know, you'd hit that limit pretty quick. So you have to. It can sneak up on you very quick, and you know, being intoxicated does not mean being drunk, right?
That's correct. And one of the questions we get asked regularly, people will ask, you know, I was charged with DWI, what's the difference between that and DUI, or vice versa? And in Virginia, it's one code section, it's 18.2-266, and technically, I mean, the terms are used interchangeably. The code section refers to driving under the influence, not driving while intoxicated. 0.08 and above does establish intoxication for all intents and purposes in court. You can be convicted with a BAC below that. So say you go down to the station and you blow a 0.06, a 0.07, anything above a 0.05 up to 0.08 doesn't create any presumption of intoxication or being under the influence. It also doesn't create any presumption that you're not under the influence. Now, if it's less than 0.05, as long as you're over 21, there is a presumption that you're not under the influence, with 0.01 to 0.04. But that 0.05 up to a 0.07 range, you can still be convicted of a DUI at that range.
And so that's an excellent point, because, you know, if I have my one Long Island iced tea and I walk out of the bar at a 0.0506, and I get stopped by the police, I could still get charged and convicted of a DUI, possibly, right?
Exactly.
It's a very, very low standard. And well, what would happen if I had my concealed firearm with me when I got pulled over for a DUI?
Well, you can't obviously have a concealed weapon on you while you're under the influence of alcohol, and if you're convicted of 18.2-266, that's a DUI law, that creates a presumption that you're under the influence by default. So if you had a concealed weapon with you, that's going to be another charge. It's going to be that weapons charge at the same time.
And if I got convicted of the DUI, I'd have to be convicted of the concealed carry violation, right?
Exactly. And just to take that one step further, even you can't even have a drink of alcohol when you're in a bar or restaurant while you're having a concealed carry weapon on you. Just the mere purchase and single drink of that, even if you're nowhere near it, 0.01, that single drink while you're carrying concealed is going to be another criminal charge for you.
Yeah. What about some of those tricks we hear out there? Well, if I drink a gallon of water before I have 2 beers, I'll be okay.
You'll be well hydrated, but not necessarily okay.
Or if I have a lot of spaghetti, remember that case?
Oh,
Oh, that was crazy.
Make the argument where the guy was fermenting spaghetti in his gut and creating alcohol. We need to try that argument one of these days. Find some big Italian guy who got pulled over who loves his spaghetti, and say he never had anything to drink. He was just fermenting alcohol off of the yeast from the spaghetti. It's amazing. All right, well, so we're about 20 minutes into the show. We wanted to cover that Facebook. Be careful tonight. The best thing, advice is to Uber, because you don't want to see him on the other side of having to pay him to get you through a case. So a $100 Uber ride is a drop in the bucket compared to what you're looking at if you get popped tonight or some other night for a DUI. And tonight is especially dangerous because they're out in full force.
That's true, yeah. And you know, the thing about it, you mentioned, you never know where those DUI checkpoints are going to be. You know, it's usually over a hill, or I remember one some years back, people going down Jefferson Avenue, you had to go to the far right lanes, and the only way to go around it is if you had to go through the apartment community, but they were right there in the apartment community too, with that blocked off, so you had to make a U-turn or a turn to get back onto the main road. So you never know.
Yeah, you never know.
You never know where they are. So they're out there. And in all fairness, it's just for safety of everyone on the road. We didn't have a chance to talk about this, but we do hear often of folks who have been killed by DUIs. And that's a serious case. They're facing a manslaughter or a more serious charge. So that's something to really consider. in the whole process.
That's right. Even not worried about getting in trouble.
Right.
Worried about the possibility you could kill somebody.
Right.
And I mean, we've represented people before who were lawfully driving down the road, and a pedestrian walked in front of them, and they hit and killed them. And because they had alcohol in their system while driving, now they're charged with some type of a DUI-related offense. DUI felony charge.
Yeah.
So,
and that'll be the last point I want to make before I take off, is just that, we get to the end of a lot of these cases and people have come to the realization, yes, I have all these penalties associated with it, DUI conviction and everything like that. But in most situations, they end up saying, it could have been worse. I could have hit somebody. I could have killed somebody.
Point. Yeah.
And hindsight's always 20/20. You never want to put yourself in that position. So most importantly, don't drink and drive, and you don't have to worry about any of these. And everybody can just get to bed and sleep well tonight. So, all right. Thanks for having me.
One more thing before you go. Because people drink and drive, should we just go ahead and outlaw everybody's driver's license?
Or cars.
Should we just make that?
Right.
I mean, I'm just wondering, for our legislatures, our Democratic legislators out there.
So,
because some people drink and drive, should we just go ahead and take away everybody's driver's license?
Because cars are as inherently dangerous as firearms,
yes.
I assume, as the argument.
Yes.
I have no comment. I'll leave that to the experts. All right. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Sean Myhill, thank you, sir. We appreciate you all listening always to the Anderson Law Power Hour podcast. Attorney Tim Anderson here, and again, Sean Myhill, the Anderson Law Firm here, 2492 North Landing Road in Virginia Beach, Suite 104. Feel free to call. Got any questions, or maybe you're facing that situation that we just spoke about? 800-1000, area code is 757, 800-1000, 757, 800-1000. And I know that's something that we're always concerned about. I just want to remind folks, another thing about, we'll get into this gun topic, I'm sure, but those of us who are, law-abiding citizens with firearms, we know the inherent dangers of that. And you cannot go out there shooting your gun up into the air. You gave us one of those pearls of wisdom. There's the prosecutor and the projectile.
Yeah, they both come out your gun.
Yeah, I never heard the word prosecutor explained before. Someone thinks but it's the shell. It's just the fact that it's going to take a survey, so to speak, and it's going to be flying around, and boom, when that projectile hits something or someone damages someone, you get found out about it. That's like a class 1 misdemeanor.
It can be worse if it hits somebody.
Yeah, if it hits somebody. Yeah.
So, you go out tonight and shoot your gun in the air, and nothing bad comes out of that. That's reckless operation of a firearm, and if you get caught, you'll be charged with a misdemeanor crime. Mm-hmm. If that bullet comes down and hits somebody and kills them, you're going to be charged with negligent homicide. So be smart. I mean, come on. You don't shoot your gun in the air to celebrate New Year's Eve. Don't be an idiot. And really don't be a jerk. A lot of, if you just don't be a jerk, a lot of the problems in life won't come your way. Nobody wants to see that. All right, so we're going to jump into some of the topics. First off, yesterday we started a group called Engage Your Government. Yeah. Now that is, we started at about 5:30 last night. We have more than 1,000 members as of when I walked in here about 20 minutes ago. Within 16, 17 hours, we have 1,000 members. And everybody on there, may have about 500 friends. Mm-hmm. And so we have, in just a very short period of time, projected a reach of 500,000 people in one day. Wow. It's unbelievable what Facebook is and what it does and how it connects people. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to be part of that group, the link is right here at the top of the page. You click on it, you be part of the group. It is a closed group, but it's open to anyone. And it's open to anyone to be able to be a part of the process. Mm-hmm. How do I engage my delegate? How do I engage my senator? Here's a local issue that's coming up that we need to talk to city council about. Mm-hmm. I'm a vet and I'm having trouble with the VA. How do I get a hold of my congressman? Okay. I'll tell you, people that have joined the group are, I haven't seen any federal people join the group yet, but we certainly have some state delegates that have joined. There's one guy who's joined who's running for the U.S. Senate, and so this is going to be a great way to connect you to your government in a nonpartisan way. It's not a Second Amendment group. It's a group about citizens wanting to engage their government on whatever the issues are. And so that's called Engage Your Government. You can Google it or put it on Facebook and find it that way, or you can click the link right above this podcast.
Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power, and information leads to knowledge. And so we want to push that information out. And, you know, I constantly am asked, what are my political motivations? Honestly, don't have any. I've had a front row seat to watching the Second Amendment community mobilize. It's been amazing. And I just want to continue in whatever this is, you know, and whatever this connection to government is, and try to make the government process better for everybody, including myself. So that's my motivation. Don't expect to see Tim Anderson's name on a ballot. That is, you know, that's not what I'm doing this for. So we're just trying to get people mobilized. But if you do join the group, I am going to encourage you to go on the ballot, because we had 30 races in the 2019 election that weren't even opposed. I mean, just people running that weren't even opposed. Every election should be a contest, even if it's for a nonpartisan, you know, race. Every election should be a contest. It shouldn't just be the incumbent gets reelected without any choice. And so we're gonna be trying to change that in the upcoming year.
January 8th, right around the corner.
January 8th, legislature picks up, and we're going to start seeing the fireworks, the real fireworks, happen on January 8th.
I'm just kind of wondering what it's going to be like in those chambers. You know, everyone running around and discussing those things. That's going to be pretty intense, I imagine.
Yeah, for sure.
The lobby day is on January 20th.
January 20th in Richmond. You know, three things about lobby day, and I want to say this. I've said this a couple times. One, I'm very nervous that lobby day is going to go very bad for gun owners. And the reason for that is that there's confirmed, reliable reports that Antifa type of counter protesters are going to show up there. And what happens if an Antifa protester brings an M80 and they throw it in the middle of the crowd, and it sounds like a gunshot? Everybody there is going to draw their firearms, and chaos is going to happen, and maybe somebody gets shot. And when that happens, it's going to look very, very poorly on the very peaceful Second Amendment participants there. So to minimize the possible risk and to maximize the likelihood we're going to have a good result, the VCDL is encouraging people not to bring your long guns, okay? You don't need to bring your AR-15s to this event, all right? You don't need to be dressed up in military gear and patrolling like you're some kind of a peacekeeping security force.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me, what's my position on the militias? Love them. Thank God for them, okay? But you're in the background, okay? We have a civilian government. The civilian government handles law and order in Virginia, not the militia. Now, if all of society breaks down and you know, we're going to hell in a handbasket, and the police are overrun, then the militia can be called up. But you're the backup. You're not the primary. And so for lobby day, there should be no militia there that think that they're peacekeepers. Now, if you want to be there, great. You want to be there as militia, great, but you're not the security force. Don't bring AR-15s. For God's sake, don't bring Confederate flags. You know, the world and nation are going to be watching what happens here, and if there's a bunch of people waving Confederate flags dressed in army outfits walking around with AR-15s, you're going to hurt the cause. Okay? Is it your right to do that? Yes. Okay, not saying that you're not right, but think about the cause rather than your individual right at this moment. Let's make a peaceful, have a peaceful lobby day. Let's show the legislatures and the world who we really are, which is a peaceful, law-abiding group of people. Not the difference between militia and renegades is the difference between lawful and unlawful, right?
Good analogy. Thanks for that.
And you don't want to be looked at as renegades. And so follow the VCDL's direction for those of you in the militia, and don't bring your long guns. Can you? Yes. Is it legal? Yes. Is it your constitutional right? Yes. But it doesn't help the cause to do that. And don't think just because you have a gun that you're some kind of a peacekeeping force, because you're not. The peacekeeping force is the Capitol Police and the Richmond Police, and the police are going to be there. And if something goes down, let the police do their jobs. Best advice for a good, lawful, happy outcome, and hopefully we can assemble. We can engage our delegates, and we can engage our representatives and senators, and we can go home in a peaceful way. I mean, I hope 2.5 million people show up to lobby day. I know they won't, but I hope they do, and I hope it's peaceful. I just don't want to see anybody there have to. I don't want to see it turn into Charlottesville, and I'm not blaming the militia for that. Just saying, you got to be careful when there's counter protesters that are going to be wound up to try to cause.
Yes, they are. There will be. Yeah. Something you mentioned here, I'd like to just kind of segue into that. On your Facebook page where you have Engage Your Government, this is a link, Keep VA 2A. And I'd like to say thanks to Scott Brown because he's on your Engage Government page. He shared the link showing the number of times delegates and Congress members have been contacted regarding HB 16 and many others in the proposed legislation. And it's suggesting the Democrats you can contact about those bills. So that'll be a good resource for you. Keep VA 2A. Be tactful and be respectful when you communicate with them as well. You know, don't want to start making threats. Well, we're going to get your kids and all that stuff. You mentioned, and thanks for your wisdom too on that. Always, Tim. It's a matter of being tactful, respectful. You'll get more positive results.
Yep. I was on a show yesterday. A guy named Cam Edwards. He has 1 million+ followers on YouTube, and I was on his show yesterday. And at the end of that, he said, "This is a persuasion campaign. You know, this isn't a time to go in there and say." We're right, you're wrong. This is a persuasion campaign, and we have to persuade the people that are one way or the other in the middle about what our positions are. Mm-hmm. And if gun day goes down, lobby day goes down bad, we're going to lose the power of persuasion, and we're going to lose the middle legislatures. Mm-hmm. And we need the middle legislatures on our side. If we have 5 Democrats come over to the Republican side on gun bills, we will not have one single gun bill pass in Virginia. And all we need is 5. And
that's exactly right. You read my mind on that.
So if we have them, you won't see a single gun law pass. But if it's total chaos on January 20th, we'll lose everybody. We may lose some Republicans even, at that point. And that is where we are. Tara, we got any reasonable questions before we move on?
We do have a question about the date. We have Mackenzie asking that she's seen several dates. Is it February 8th, 13th, or the 20th?
It's January 20th.
January 8th is the General Assembly Day when they convene. January 20th is Lobby Day.
That's the day where the VCDL is organized and where you can actually go there and talk to your delegates.
Yeah.
January 20th. And that's in Richmond at the Capitol.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully answer those questions for her.
Anything else before we move on? All right, very good. All right, so the past, since Saturday, I have been not talking about guns really for the most part, right? I've been talking about some of the other things. So there is a bill that talks about how we elect our president. Mm-hmm. All right, interesting bill. So there is this compact that has been formulating with mostly Democrat states where they are going to take the position that their electors in the electoral college will vote how the national popular vote goes. Mm-hmm. So in 2016, Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump in the popular vote by a couple million people. And so what the compact is basically aiming to do is if that were to happen again, then the electors of these states will vote as the population of the national population goes rather than the population of the state. And there are 15 states that have joined the compact, which comprise about 196 electors. Virginia has 13. So if Virginia were to join, that gets us closer to 270. And once you have 270, that's the ball game. Mm-hmm. So if enough of these states join that compact, then the Electoral College has no value anymore because these 18, 19, 20 states are going to say we're going to vote the popular vote, and then the rest of the country's not going to, their electors are going to have no say because you've created this block of states that are always going to vote by the popular vote. Now, how it works right now is that in Virginia, it's winner takes all. Yeah. So whoever votes more for the president, they get all the electors. And in 2016, that was Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. But the nice thing about the Electoral College is California gets 55 votes because they're so big. But when you divide 55 votes into how many people are in that state, and then you divide the 13 votes from Virginia into how many people we have in our state, per capita, our electoral votes are more valuable than California's votes.
Right.
Even though it's a big number, per capita, it is more valuable for the smaller states to have these votes. And so the purpose of the college was the Founding Fathers set up the Electoral College because they wanted the contest to be geographic, not popular. And so each state gets to decide how they're going to do things. And so even though Hillary Clinton got 2 million more votes, most of those were in New York and California. And they were capped out at how many votes that they got. And so the other states still got to weigh in on who they wanted to be their president. And Virginia's trying to change that. The Democrats are trying to change that and enter into this compact. So that's kind of a scary thing to think about, because basically when you get enough in there, and you have at least 270, then it's going to be a national vote how it's going to go. And now, at least in my lifetime, and yours too, it's only happened twice that a president has lost the popular vote but won the Electoral College. Donald Trump and George W. Bush against Al Gore. Okay, so those are the two. And so obviously the Democrats aren't really, they may be thinking about George W. Bush, but they're mostly thinking about the Donald Trump thing. So they don't ever want to see that happen again, and it's designed in a way to make sure that the higher populated states like California and New York, which are mostly Democratic, are going to get to have a bigger say in who the president is than a state like Rhode Island would get, or a state like, a smaller populated state like Arkansas or something like that. Right now, the presidents have to compete nationwide.
Yeah.
If you have 20 states and they get to decide what happens, you just campaign in those 20 states. And so that's on the table. Voter ID.
Right.
That one is on the table for some reason, and it's unbelievable how many bills there are, like 6 or 7, that deal with voter ID. Want to eliminate voter ID.
Right.
You can walk in to the polling place. One of the bills is with just a utility bill.
Right.
That's scary, because if I had your utility bill, Mark,
Right.
and I walked into the Newport News voting district where you vote, I could say I'm Mark Rawlson.
And you can go vote 5 separate places.
Well, I could at least vote there for you.
There, yeah. Right.
I could at least vote there for you, and with your utility bill.
Right.
It's insane. And in Virginia, it's always been, the poor people, it takes away from the poor people and all that. The Department of Elections will get you a photo ID voter card for free.
That's right. We talk about that, another concept you share with us with regards to background checks and others. It's the integrity of the system.
Yeah.
How easy is it? You go to DMV, you go any place, wherever it's social service, wherever. There's, in my opinion, respectfully to those who are proposing this, I've tried to ask if there are anyone who could not get an ID. There's no way. You can always get an ID some way, somewhere, and it's important for you to have.
Exactly. I don't even know how you could live in today's society without a photo identification.
Yeah.
How are you going to open a bank account?
Right.
How are you going to? When I went to the the Chesapeake City Council to speak to them about Second Amendment stuff, I had to have my photo ID to get into that building. To get into the city council building, I had to have my photo ID. How do you get into if you get a speeding ticket, and you have to, how are you going to identify who you are if you're driving? What if you get, what if you're in the car with somebody and they get pulled over and the officer wants to identify you and you don't have a photo identification? I mean, it's insane to think that everybody doesn't have a photo identification. But if you don't, and you're just in one of these situations where you can't get one because of whatever your circumstances are, you can get one from the Department of Elections for free. And all you got to do is you just got to go in there, and you have to bring your birth certificate. You have to bring, to prove you're a U.S. citizen. Right. You have to bring some proof of who you are and where you live, and they can do that with utility bills and other ways of independently verifying that, and then they can cross-reference that with other government databases, and they can say, okay, yeah, you're Mark Rawlson, we know you, and here's your photo ID to vote. And it's just such a ridiculous concept that we need to get rid of that. that is somehow prejudicing people's ability to vote. Now, on the other side of the coin, the Republicans would say, oh, well, this is all about getting illegal people to vote, or this is all about dead people voting and all of that. On that side of the equation, how many people falsely vote in an election? I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows that answer. But if Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump by 2.5 million votes, I don't know that I can buy the concept that those 2.5 million people were all illegal, right?
Right.
I mean, I think she fairly and squarely probably did win the popular vote by some number, but I do think that a lot of those people are in states like California and New York, and that's why we have the Electoral College, is to fine, California, you go to the Democrats. Fine, New York, you go to Democrats. I mean, think of this. Every year, you have to get 270 to win. Every year,
yes, that's right,
they start off with 85. There's no doubt that California and New York are going to go, so the Democrats already have a huge advantage. There's very rarely, there's a couple of states that will always go Republican, but it comes out to maybe 25 or 30 coming out of the gate. So coming out of the gate, the Democrats always have the advantage in a presidential election. And so it's a fight for the other states. It's a fight for the battlegrounds. And that's just how the elections work. So the Democrats already have the advantage. They don't need any more. Let it be a fair fight in the other states, and let the the nation that is not clustered in New York City and Los Angeles make some determinations of who we want to be the leaders.
Yeah. If you got a social security number, you should have an ID.
Yeah.
It's that simple, really, in many regards. Any good questions, enticing questions, exciting talk and discussion today?
Let's see. Alright, we have one question from Ricky asking if the Supremacy Clause and how the Supremacy Clause in the Constitution will affect us if some of these proposed laws are passed.
Yeah, so so the issue about the Electoral College, people have asked me that, is the Supreme Court going to be able to step in on that? The Constitution lets the states decide how their electors vote. Now, like for instance, like Nebraska and Maine, they don't do winner takes all. They do it by congressional district. And by the way, there's a bill in Virginia for that to happen too, and I'm a big fan of that. So basically, how it would work in Virginia is if there's 11 congressional districts and then the 2 senators, so we get 13 votes. So the 2 would be wild cards, and they would vote for whoever the population of the state went for. And the other 11, if the 4th district or the 2nd district where I live in Virginia Beach, if that district voted for a Republican, then that one electoral vote would go to the Republican. And if in District 1, if that district voted for the Democrat, that one vote would go to the Democrat. So kind of split that up. But if the question is would the Supreme Court stop a band of states from coming together? And I think the answer to that question is probably not, because the states get to decide how their electors vote. And if enough of the states come together and that's what they want to do, then I don't think you're going to see the Supreme Court have the constitutional basis to set that aside. As to election laws, there's nothing really on point constitutionally about what you have to be able to vote. Although I will say that Facebook declared me to be a political operative recently.
Oh my!
and in order to continue posting videos, I had to send in a copy of my driver's license, and they had to mail me a letter with a code to my home address, and I had to plug that in to be able to prove who I was. And it's kind of funny to be able to talk about politics.
Right. You
got to have a photo ID, but to actually vote,
right.
The Democrats would say you shouldn't have to have anything. So those are really not going to be covered under the Supremacy Clause, because the states are going to have a little bit of reign there. But I think like you said, the integrity of the system, right? If all you have to have is a
utility bill,
right? If that's all you have to have to vote. Are more people going to falsely vote? Yes, right? There's going to be more fraud, and there's not going to be any way to stop that. I walk into a Newport News voting booth and say I'm Mark Rawlison, there's not going to be anything that they can do to stop that from happening, right? And then when you get there later and you say, hey, I'm Mark Rawlison.
The real one.
And
Right.
they're like, no, sir, you've already voted.
Right.
Now your vote's been stolen, right? Your vote's been, you're not going to let you vote. You'll have to prepare a provisional ballot, and they don't even count those unless it's a close enough contest. And so it just opens the door. Whether you think election fraud happened, it opens the door to more people gaming the system. And I would think that we would want less people to game the system.
That's right. Yeah.
Most of my friends are Republicans, and what would stop me from going and getting all their utility bills and driving all over Virginia Beach and voting for them? I mean, it could happen. I mean, it'd be a crime. It's a crime to do that.
Right.
But what would stop that from happening? Republicans could abuse it as much as Democrats, and so it's a very, very dangerous thing to take away a control for something as important as
Good
voting.
point. Yeah. All right.
Anything else, Tara?
That's it.
All right. Well, that's good.
All
right. Well, so the next thing that we've been talking about recently is something about zoning, right? So here's what they're proposing to do. So cities have zoning laws, and in like Newport News, Virginia Beach, we live in neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods might be single family zoned, or they may be multifamily zoned. And the problem, the benefit of a single family zoned neighborhood is that your neighbor can't build a multifamily unit right next to you, right? Your neighbor can't put a 10-story garage on their property because it's a single-family housing zone. So that's why we have zoning laws, is basically to protect us from our neighbors doing what they want with their property. And that's the deal we make with the city. So when I bought my house, and I live in a single-family neighborhood, when I bought my house, I bought a single-family house with the expectations that that's not going to change. What the state wants to do now is take that away. And they want to let anybody, anywhere, be able to put a multifamily unit anywhere in Virginia. So if a builder comes in and wants to buy my neighbor's house, knock it down, and put a mid-level community next to me, they can do that, and there's nothing that me or the city of Virginia Beach could do to stop that.
Those zones would be
gone. There'd be no
commercial,
zones.
ABC, whatever, they would be gone.
Well, I think they'd still be able to. What they're trying to do is just mostly deal with single-family residential and multifamily residential. Okay. But there are places like Houston where there are no zones. I mean, you could have in the middle of a neighborhood a Wawa if you wanted. I mean, they let that happen. But that getting into the equation in Houston, right? So here in Virginia Beach, we live in a single-family neighborhood. You pay more to live in a single-family neighborhood than you do in a multifamily neighborhood. And so that's just how it is. Not saying people are better or people are worse, but you pay more to live there.
Sure.
So my house value is here. And then when my neighbor's house gets knocked down and they're going to put, 2 fourplexes next to me, then my house value is going to go down because less people are going to want to live in a neighborhood where there's more people, right?
Sure.
That's just how it is. It's not a racial thing. It's just simply a way of life thing. Some people want to live in an urban area where there's lots of high-rise apartments and townhouses everywhere. Some people want that lifestyle, and other people want to live in a single-family neighborhood. That's the deal we made with the city. And so when my house value's here and then they put a duplex next to me, my house value is going to come down because less people are going to want to pay the premium of living in a single-family neighborhood. Well, that is called socialism. All right? That's socialism as best as can be defined. So you're taking my property value and you're taking somebody who can't afford to live in my neighborhood, and you're devaluing my property, and you're bringing them up to where we are at the same level when the people that live in multifamily housing didn't pay the same thing that I paid.
Right.
So they're taking from me, giving it to someone else, and then I'm the one who ends up with lesser value, and they get the benefit of living in the neighborhood. And that is socialism. Making everybody equal. Okay, so if you've never seen socialism in action or really thought about what it is, that's what it is. Now, my kids have a good school system. My kids have a safe neighborhood to live in, and shouldn't everybody have that?
Right.
Sure, but it shouldn't come by you taking the value from me and giving it to someone else who can't afford to live in that neighborhood. And what they could put next door could be anything. It could be just a standard duplex where people rent it. It could be Section 8. Anything could be Section 8, by the way. Any house could be Section 8 in Virginia. I could make my house Section 8. You get a subsidy. Basically, that means somebody's not paying the full rent and the government's paying the difference. Section 8 could be Section 8 housing. It could be public housing. In fact, the delegate specifically said that. It could be public housing. It could be, they could put a halfway house next there where, maybe people getting out of prisons are being able to live right next to you. And that's not the deal I made with the city when I bought my house and I paid the premium for it. So what that generally is called is eminent domain in a lot of ways when the government comes in and takes your property. And I'm calling it de facto eminent domain. It's basically saying you are not taking my property, but you're taking my property value.
Right.
And so, I grew up, I went to school, I went to college, I went to law school, I've started a law firm, I worked my butt off. And so I, have worked hard for where I want to live.
Yeah.
And somebody who hasn't made those same decisions gets to live in the exact same neighborhood than me. That's socialism.
Gotcha. Yeah.
That is socialism, no matter, wherever you are on this spectrum, that is socialism. The guy who works super hard gets to live here. The guy that doesn't work super hard gets to live in the same place. And that is not what I am inherently for. Now, the people that can afford to live in my neighborhood, I think they should have their own places to live, and they should have all the resources that I get to my schools, and the teachers should be paid the same, and the classroom should be the same. Everything should be the same, but I should get the benefit of living in a single-family neighborhood, not a multi-family neighborhood, if I chose to do that.
That's correct, yeah.
And that is kind of my take on that, and I've been trying to talk about that and bring that issue up, and hopefully that will start sticking. So anyway, well, I think we're almost out of time. Any last questions before we go, Tara?
Not at this time.
Okay, very good. So Happy New Year.
Yep, thank you, sir.
See you next year, Mark, in 2020. Happy New Year to you, Facebook. Join the Engage Your Government page by clicking up above, and we will see you in 2020. It's below. Just hit